Okay then, welcome. Can I just ask, and I'm sure you have, just keep your mics off if possible if you're not speaking so that we can hear everybody when they do. And please put all your questions in the chat. And I'm not certain if it is being recorded at the moment, but we are aiming to record the session. So I hope that isn't an issue for you. Okay then, so today we have some academics here, and we also have some of our students to talk about the work we do at Lincoln and our interest and our enthusiasm for psychology. We hope that this evening we can introduce you to a range of different sorts of psychology, and although there are 5 of us here who are academics, actually there are more 50 or more still in the department, and so the breadth of what we do is much beyond what we can possibly cover in this session. But please do ask all the questions you want of us, and we can try and fill you in. We of course want to, when you do psychology, to give you lots of knowledge and lots of information, but we also want you to give you a sort of information that can actually be useful in life. And psychology is one of those subjects. It really can be useful for what you want to go on and do in life. And even at this moment, when we're in the sort of the pandemic, then we know that we do need the psychologists to be looking at what's the difficulties, the mental health problems, all the problems that we're getting probably associated with the lockdowns that we're having. We need psychologists to actually look at maybe the influence on our children of not being able to go to school in lockdown 1. So we do have lots of sort of really topical things that we can apply ourselves to, and you'll hear about some of that later as we go through. I'm actually Dr. Lesley Allinson, so my area is actually in child psychology, and my real interest is in that of those developmental psychopathology, the sorts of problems that mean that children do not develop in a typical way as their peers do. Maybe they have problems such as autism, and autism indeed is the topic that I'm interested in. I work quite closely with schools, specialist schools for autism on that. So we have a very broad range here today. But certainly I think it's important that psychology does matter, and it does matter to us all, that probably we're so enthusiastic about our subject. So we look forward to answering your questions, and I won't delay too long because I'm now going to call on Dr. Paul Goddard, to talk to you about making psychology matter for you. So over to Paul then.
Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for coming along today, which is probably one of the strangest open day events that I've ever been involved with, but it's great to have you all here. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about what psychology is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why it might be good to study psychology at university. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the difference between studying psychology at university compared to studying it, say, at school or college. But before that, I'm going to try and do something here. I hope it works. I'm going to try and ask you a question. And what I just want to know from our visitors today is, have you done any kind of psychology before? And it might be kind of, it might be you've done an A-level, you've been doing a psychology class, or you've done a GCSE, or you've read a book on it, or you're doing some health and social care, BTEC, or something like that. I just wanted to get a flavour for how much psych people might have done before. And so far, oh, that's interesting. So far, it's sort of the people who have declared some previous knowledge. We've got 9 who have done some psych before, 1 who hasn't, and 10 abstainers. I like that. 10 people sitting on the fence. I don't blame you. That's what I would have done. But thank you very much. That's useful for me, because if we're asking the question of what psychology is, and I'll pose I'll pose you a little question. You probably thought you were going to turn up today and just be able to relax and listen, but I'm going to pose you a question here. And I just want you to think for a moment of what psychology is. What do you think psychology is, and what do you think it means to you? And I'll give you exactly 5 seconds to consider what your answer to that would be. There you go, that's your 5 seconds up. And don't panic, I'm not going to ask anybody what they think it is, but just for a moment, reflect on what you think it is. Possibly, if you've been doing an A-level, you've probably got a definition from one of the A-level boards that psychology is something like the scientific study of mind and behavior. So we've got the science in there, so you've probably been looking at studies in your A-level or whatever course you've been doing. You've got the mind in there, that's what we think about. And behavior, that's the actions people make. And that's the kind of standard definition of psychology. In fact, one of the main A-level psychology texts was psychology, scientific study of mind and behavior. So probably you've got a pretty good idea of what you're going to be getting at university. And that's a great definition, although because it's so broad, it almost becomes meaningless. Because if it's anything to do with the mind, that's anything you might ever think, see, any emotion you might have, any beliefs you have, any expressions you ever make. That's the mind, it's anything, it's any thought or idea that anybody's ever had. And if we talk about behavior, that's anything that anybody ever does, or any animal does. So although it's a useful definition, it's so broad as it almost becomes a bit meaningless. And I suppose in a way it's about human nature, it's about what makes us tick. And I pose that because I think the reason why psychology matters, especially studying it at university, is we won't give you the definition of psychology. We won't tell you that psychology is the scientific study of mind and behavior. We won't give you that. We won't tell you what psychology is. At A-level, I think you do get told what psychology is. Yet when you get to university, now's the time when you start to think differently about the subject matter that you're engaging with. Rather than the tutors telling you what things are, now we're going to encourage you to develop what your definition of psychology is. We've got something like between 60 and 80 full-time members of academic staff at the university. They tend to be specialists in their areas. And each of those will come up with a different consideration of what psychology really means to them. Each of those tutors has formulated what they think psychology is, what their definition of psychology is. And I think the challenge for you as you go into study psychology in higher education, whether you do it at Lincoln or anywhere else, it's for you to engage with the subject area. Don't listen to what we say, but to arrive at what your definition of psychology is, what matters to you, what you consider psychology to be. And if you can do that, then you'll have made a success out of your undergraduate career. Don't just listen to what other people say. So that's one issue. The other issue I was just going to mention, because I knew the session was coming up, and although we've got loads of staff, there's so many I don't even know how many there are, but it's more than 60 full-time members of staff. The only thing they do is teach psychology to the degree. What we do and what a difference is when I've asked my tutees about studying psychology is they tend to have one or maybe two teachers that take them through their psychology A-level or their psychology course. What we try and do to get that rapport with the students that you get with your A-level tutors is we have a tutorial system. So although we've got loads of staff, we try and still make sure that we have that rapport with our tutorial sessions. Every week you'll have a tutorial meeting with your tutor in the first year. We meet with our second year's tutor groups and we meet with our third year tutor groups as well. So right through the 3 years, you'll be meeting with your academic tutor. I spoke to my third year tutor group this week and I told them this session was coming up. And I said, what kind of things should I say in this session? introducing psychology. And what's that transition? What's the difference that they've experienced doing psychology at school or college and then moving on to university? And they said, well, firstly, rather than just studying psychology at university, you start to do psychology more. So there's a big emphasis on the research methods. So for the 3 years you're at university, you'll be studying 4 modules each semester. We break an academic year down into 2 semesters. And each semester, you'll have 1 research skills module. So that means a quarter of your study time will be doing psychology. So it's not reading psychology or studying it, it's actually doing it. And I think the great thing about psychology is much of the material in psychology is up for grabs. We don't know the answer to it. We don't really know why people behave the way they do. And that means there's lots of arguments, lots of controversies. You've probably come across controversies in your own studies, looking at nature, nurture, intelligence, conformity, issues like that. So we don't really know why people are the way they are. And this means as third years, when you're doing your study, when you actually do your own study that lasts the whole year, the single most important piece of work you'll do at university, there's a good chance that you'll find out something new about people that's not been discovered before. And that's a great thing. Psychology, it's still up for grabs. The other natural sciences, physics, biology, maths, as an undergraduate student, you'd be unlikely to make a novel discovery in those research areas. But in psychology, because we're dealing with people and it's so broad, remember that definition, it's anything anybody ever thinks, any way anybody ever behaves. It's so broad that you're never far away from making a brand new novel discovery. So for me, I think psychology does matter, and it matters to you because at university, rather than being told what psychology is, which you get in the curriculum at A-level, at university, you've got more of a choice to make psychology mean what you want it to. You can define psychology. You can pick the area of psychology that's going to be really important to you. And you've got that freedom to do it. So rather than being a passive learner at A-level, at university, I think you've got that option to direct your own learning, become an active learner. We used to use a phrase that at Lincoln, we like to imagine that our students are producers of knowledge, not just consumers of knowledge. So I think the little message I'd just like to give to you, and this is wherever you go, try and be a producer of knowledge. I think I should probably shut up there or I'll take up the whole session.
I may put my mic back on again then. Thank you for that, Paul. And I could see Cassy nodding at a few of those comments you made. So if you could just briefly tell us what you think that your transition to university was. Before I let you do that, you are a student going into your second year now. So perhaps you want to tell our visitors about transitioning to university and psychology. Okay?
Hello, I'm Cassy. I am a second year psychology with clinical psychology student, and I was agreeing with a lot of what Paul said there because it really resonated with me that when you come to university, you become a lot more in control of your learning, particularly in something like psychology. You are able to be more independent with your study. You read outside of your topic area. In control of what you're doing. You get to do your own research. You get to investigate what you like, what you find interesting, which does really drive that passion for psychology. You get to do whatever you want to do and control your own pathway. I mean, thinking about my experience of A-level, you have, like I said, one teacher who gives you a set amount of information, set things you've got to learn, one book, generally, I remember from my A-level. And one of the biggest steps for me was entering university and meeting such a wide range of staff, so many people with different perspectives, different expertise. different points of view, getting to understand all this like new ways of thinking, and then being able to take my own opinions on board. What do I think? Who do I resonate to? What area am I most interested in? And to go away and be able to do that myself, it's a really wonderful experience, and it has really fueled my passion for psychology, as I hope by the end of today you will share some of that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cassy. That's great. So now we'll move over and listen to what Georgina has got to say. Dr. Georgina Goose, as that is actually one of our academics, and she's going to talk to us about her passion for psychology and what she does. Okay, Georgina, over to you.
Hi everyone, good evening. It's great to be talking to you all this evening. So as Lesley said, my name is Georgina and I'm a lecturer here in psychology at the University of Lincoln. So I thought it would be particularly useful today to briefly explain why I wanted to become a psychologist. So I began my journey studying psychology at A-level. I didn't do it at GCSE, although I know that some people have done this at GCSE, but I started my journey really at A-level. I remember actually finding the subject quite hard to get to grips with in the beginning. However, I really enjoyed learning about psychology overall, and it turns out to actually be my favourite A-level. So I then went on to study psychology at undergraduate level. I loved it so much that I carried it on afterwards, studying an MSc in forensic psychology, and then finally I went on to do my PhD. So I loved it that much I stayed in academia for a very long time. What I love most about psychology is how it can be applied to so much in the real world. Particularly, I find it really interesting how the use of psychological methods and research findings can be used to solve practical real-world problems. So areas that psychology has a positive influence on, which I know Lesley mentioned some of these at the beginning, include mental health, organisations and occupational settings, workplace settings, business management, education, health, product design, sport, engineering, all these types of things that psychology can be applied to. For me, I would say I'm most interested in how psychology can be applied to criminal investigations and particularly the law. So this is where I think I want to take most of my psychological research, and in particular I've been particularly interested in the pre-conviction stage of the criminal process. So this is just everything that happens before someone's convicted of a crime. So I'm very interested in the different procedures that the police use to determine who's committed a crime. So this could include things like obtaining person descriptions from witnesses and victims when a crime's taken place, and also the use of police identification parades. So you might know these as police lineups. They're quite typically referred to police lineups, which is the phrase, or the American phrase for police identification parades. So most specifically here, I'm interested in how accurate witnesses and victims are at describing a suspect to the police, and how accurate they are at identifying someone from a lineup. I'm interested in eyewitness testimony, which if any of you have studied psychology before or read around the area of psychology, you'll probably know that that refers to an account given of an event that someone has witnesses. And I'm also interested in eyewitness identification. However, I'd say my main area of interest and where I've particularly gained an interest in over the years, mostly from other academics when I was studying really, who really drove my passion in the area, is that of eyewitness testimony. And this just refers to where a victim or a witness or a victim of a crime provides a description of a suspect's voice rather than a description of what they look like. It also refers to the process of identifying a suspect from a police lineup just using their voice alone. I've also been particularly interested in the use of voice disguise. So you probably know what voice disguise is, but just disguising your voice in some way. So for crimes that are committed, people will typically use many different ways of disguising their voice, but one of the most frequently reported ways from criminals is increasing or decreasing the pitch of your voice to make it sound different. So I've been really interested in that throughout all my studies, and also some of the things I teach on the modules that I teach on now. I include that in some of the material as well. I've also been interested in courtroom practices, so psychology can really be applied to the courtroom process. So looking at how different types of questions might impact upon the reliability and accuracy of the testimony provided in court. And also how we can better support witnesses, so how we can support them into giving better accounts when giving evidence in court. So that's really me in a nutshell. I hope you found that bit of information interesting and useful to you. Hopefully this has highlighted all the great ways that psychology can be applied to the real world, and particularly for me, where my interest lies in that of the criminal justice system. So thank you.
Thank you, Georgina. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Bonaventura Majora. Well, we know him as Bino, and he will introduce himself as surely as Bino. And he's going to tell you about some very, very different area that we do that in psychology. And I'm sure you'll be interested in his area as well. Hello, Bino.
Hello, everybody. Yes, as Lesley said, my name is Bonaventura, but everybody call me Bino Majora. I'm an associate professor here in psychology, and my main research focuses on social evolution. So I try to understand what factors led humans to behave the way we behave by focusing on other species. I mostly work with monkeys. And the reason why it's important to use other species in order to understand human behavior is because now the majority of humans live in very complex and technologically advanced societies, but the way our behavior and cognition evolved, the conditions under which our behavior and cognition evolved are very different from what we see in modern societies. Unfortunately, there is very little that you can do to understand human behavior from archaeological records, for example, or from fossil records, because you don't have a lot of information on behavior. And so studying monkeys and apes and other social species is very important, because you can try to behave like a detective to understand how humans' ancestors behaved and how they changed during the course of evolution to become the species we are now. Most of the work that I do is on pro-society, so I work on cooperation, altruism, why we make friends, why friends are important, but I also study what factors elicit aggression and competition, how aggression affects society, and so on. So very important themes that are important not just for understanding social evolution, but also that have an impact on how we behave and how we see societies and the place of individuals in society. One example of why studying monkeys is important is exactly on our understanding of friendship and why friends are important. The seminal work on the importance of friendship for human well-being, emotional stability, and health really comes from research on monkeys and other social species, so species that live in relatively large and stable social groups, pretty much as we do. So research on monkeys, for example, has shown that monkeys that have a larger network of friends, and we measure friendship mostly in terms of how often two individuals are close to each other without any fighting, and in monkeys, in macaques, the species that I study, we use grooming, so whether they clean the coat of other individuals. These are all signs of friendship. And research on monkeys has shown that the larger the network of friends that an individual has, the healthier it is, the less parasites this monkey has, the more able the monkey is to cope with social stress, and so the longer they live and the larger the infant that they can produce. This research has been very important to try to see whether the same pattern appears in humans. And now there is a growing amount of evidence that sociality, so the number of friends that we have, has an impact on our well-being. Is actually the size of our social network is one of the most important predictor of lifespan in humans, together with smoking, whether we smoke or not, whether we have an history of a medical history, and so on. So it's a very important factor. So the next step for researchers like me and for social psychologists to try, for example, to understand whether having an extended network of friends through social media has the same benefits as having face-to-face social interaction. So again, it's a very, unfortunately, to some extent because of the pandemic, it's a very timely and important issue. Can we substitute our friends through face-to-face interactions with friends that we maintain to social media? Unfortunately, at the moment, it looks like having an extended network of friends on social media is important, but is not as beneficial as having face-to-face interactions. So I'll finish here by saying that this, I think, it's important, and it's I guess the hope for everybody is that we will be able to see you in person very soon when the pandemic is over. And of course, if you have any question, you can ask me in the chat. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bino. We may come back to you actually, because I think there's lots of questions that people want to ask, because I don't suppose our visitors have come much into this area of psychology or so they'll probably come back with some questions to you. So for next up, I think we're going to ask Rachel Dagnall, and she is also a forensic psychologist. So a little bit weighted to forensic psychologists, but we have a great wide range, as I say. Maybe you can tell us your route and how you became the psychologist you are now, and actually the forensic psychologist you are now. Okay?
Thank you, Lesley. Evening, everybody. Hopefully I can give you a bit of a different perspective to Georgina, because I'm quite late on in my career coming into academia, and prior to working at the university, I was working and still work and still practice as a forensic psychologist. So for about 17 years prior to coming to the university, I became qualified as a psychologist and worked in the prison service. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I came about going into that career, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how psychology works within the prison setting. So I came into the career same as Georgina, really, in terms of studying at A-level, and I particularly loved studying around developmental psychology, and I really enjoyed cognitive psychology too. And when I sort of completed my A-level, I didn't really know where to go in terms of my studying, but I decided to go on to study a degree in psychology, and at this point my sort of career goals are to be an educational psychologist. My mum was a teacher, so this was sort of my goals that I was going to go ahead for. But during my time, my dad actually became a prison officer, and I didn't even know psychologists worked in the prison setting. And once he became a prison officer, I became quite curious and interested in how psychology could be applied into prison settings. So luckily I was really fortunate to get a visit into a prison, because not many people experience prison unless they visit somebody in there or they go to prison for an offence or they work there. So I kind of got to know the psychologist through my dad, and did some placements there, some voluntary work there, and in doing that I really got this sort of interest in why do people commit offences, and why do people come to a point in their life where they do harmful things to other people. And this started my real interest in forensic psychology. And so following that, I went on to gain a position working as a psychological assistant in the prison service. I then went on to do my master's study, and then I qualified as a forensic psychologist through doing supervised practice for about 5 years. So it was a lengthy route, but it was definitely a route I wanted to go ahead and sort of put all my passion and dedication into that. And like I say, it took quite a bit of time, and I didn't qualify until 2012. I had a child in between, but I qualified in 2012, and that's sort of when my career really started in forensic psychology. And my particular area of interest developed in personality disorder, and so thinking about why some people develop really sort of certain traits or complex traits that then lead them to act in certain ways or lead them to have problems with relationships with others. I became a clinical lead of a psychologically informed planned service, which was a service where I worked really closely with prison officers and advised prison officers how best to work with these people that were living in prison. So I worked with a range of offences, so violent offending, sexual offending, and I started to help people in prison to try and readdress the difficulties they had and try to think about how they could best go back into the community, be reintegrated back into the community, and sort of engage with the community in a meaningful and helpful way and stop offending happening or try and reduce the chance of offending happening again. So in psychology, in forensic settings, we draw on all the stuff that you learn from your degree. So even now, I'm still sort of going back and thinking about what I learned in my cognitive psychology lectures, what I learned in my developmental psychology, what I've learned from social psychology, and using all of that learning to think about how we can put that into practice to help people reduce their risk of reoffending in the future. And as a psychologist in the prisons, you often work closely not only with the men and women who commit offences, but you also work closely with the staff teams as well, so with the prison officers, the prison governors, other psychologists, psychiatrists. And so you get this real sort of rich, sort of diverse experience working really closely with lots of different groups. And again, you sort of not only working with people who've committed offences to help reduce their risk, but you're training staff, you're offering a consultancy service about how you can really trying to train other people in psychological principles and psychological knowledge. So yeah, so that's my sort of career. That's how I got into what I did, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody's got. So please put some questions in sort of the chat function, and I'm more than happy to sort of answer how I went on into that career. Thank you, Lesley.
Thank you. Can I just say anybody can put questions up and we can answer them when we can. So do put them up. This session is for you to find out. So get your answers, please, today. Do ask us. So thanks. That's given a really good insight, I think, to what forensic psychology is. And as you say, you were unaware of it when you were sort of obviously at your A-level stage. I think it's also really very important, the point that you make, is that you are drawing all the time on the basic psychology that you learn. And so we do a very good basic degree here, and that is our single honours course. But we can also have these specialisms course, a little bit of forensic or a little bit of clinical. And you mentioned personality there, when actually it's quite closely linked to the forensic and the clinical type work. Some of those courses might overlap even. So thank you very much for that. So all our courses are BPS accredited, so they all allow you to come to be a forensic psychologist or a clinical psychologist or any other psychologist at the end of the day. Though it's only a preference that you might want to choose one of our with subjects. Okay, so that's really great, and I'm sure we'll come back for more questions to you if we have time. But can I bring in now Andrej, who is a student of ours, a third-year student of ours. So he's got a lot of experience behind him now. Are you there, Andrej?
Yes, good evening. Hello.
Okay, let's hear your experiences. Now you've been here and done a few years with us, yes.
So as Lesley said, my name is Andrej, and I'm a third-year psychology with clinical psychology, I might add, student. And I think, being in the last year, it's a great opportunity to sort of reflect on what I've learned and what I've experienced in Lincoln. And when I was sort of thinking about where I would go and study, I'm an EU student actually. I'm from the Czech Republic, so it was quite interesting to compare the options. And what I really liked about Lincoln was Lincoln itself actually. So when you guys have some time, do visit, because it's charming and wonderful. But it was also the option to sort of specialize a little bit, as Lesley said. I was really interested in clinical topics from the very beginning, particularly in personality and sexuality. So I was really interested in sort of this area, and I wanted to learn more about those things. And when I came to Lincoln, when I actually started studying, it was quite surprising for me, because I thought, well, there was 300 of us in the first year on the course, and I didn't really think that people would talk to one another or meet the lecturers in person. But I actually found out very soon that the people are very approachable. There are many opportunities to sort of interact. So I would confidently say that I know most of our lecturers, and have met them at some point during lectures or open days, for example, or events like that. And I think that's another sort of area of Lincoln that stands out is are the opportunities to get involved. Over the 3 years, I've been a course representative. I've been a course representative for 2 years, which is a student elected position where you sort of raise feedback of your fellow students with the school, and you get to work with the school leads, which is quite interesting. You get to learn about what's sort of happening in terms of development and teaching. So that was great. And now in my final year, I'm actually project coordinator for cultural exchange sessions. Because I'm from the Czech Republic and I speak more than one language, we're sort of, me and other international students, we're trying to give the home students the opportunity to learn other languages so they can come and join our classes. And we've got quite a few languages that we're teaching right now. And obviously there's the opportunity to join the Students' Union and to join the societies and sports there. So I was a part of a choir for 2 years. So I've tried everything, I would say. And in terms of academic development, I would say that what I really, really liked about my sort of learning and the modules and everything was that it's quite flexible, and we have sort of the modular approach in Lincoln, which means that we don't really have small subjects that you sort of have at high school, or we've got big modules. And as Rachel said, we always need to bring the pieces together. So as a psychology student, you will always be relating to what you've previously done and learned. And you might discover things that you didn't really know about and are very, very interesting. So when I came here, I hated maths and biology quite a lot, and now I'm a stats nerd, which is a very interesting development. I really, really enjoy statistics, learning about statistics. So, you start with this general overview of I want to do psychology, but there's so much in there that you can really pick what you're interested in. And that's another thing that's great about Lincoln. When you do your modules in the first year, you've got the general knowledge. And that's also tested through the assessments that we have here. But you can actually focus on what you're interested in. Because for example, writing essays, there are several topics from that module. So you can pick whatever you're interested in, and it makes it more interesting for you and easier for you to actually focus on something and specialize in the end. So for me, I focused on personality disorders in clinical psychology, how it is that we've we've got them and what we can do to help those people, and what it actually means to be a psychopath. And I think if you ask Rachel, she'll be able to, or Georgina, that they'll be able to give you some very interesting information about that. So that's definitely something that I enjoyed. And what I would sort of say to conclude this little insight is that it's not easy. It's not always easy. There are modules that are more difficult, more challenging to you because you might not necessarily be that interested, but because of the linking and because of bringing all the puzzle pieces together, it's there's always something that you can find. So I can't say I hated something, because when I actually got into it, when I was reading about the brain biology and how we develop, you know, from conception to where we are right now, there's always something interesting there. So that's what I love about psychology. Thank you, Lesley.
Oh, thank you very much. And I know one thing you might also just probably just briefly what I'd like to mention is the fact that you are actually, this is your 4th year, although you're only in the 3rd year, and that's for a really good reason, wasn't it, that you actually was able to take an opportunity last year?
Yeah, I wasn't a bad boy and I didn't skip a year, but I actually decided to go and study abroad, which is something that the School of Psychology supports. And I picked the wonderful, wonderful University of Padua in Italy. And I can say honestly, at the beginning, I was a little skeptical. I wasn't sure that I wanted to, you know, go to another country because I'd moved to the UK. But in the end, I would say that was probably the second best decision in my life, because I met new people. I've experienced higher education from different sort of perspective. I actually did learn a little Italian, but it's not a conversational thing. And overall, the whole thing is just, it's an unforgettable experience. And even academically, the major advantage there is that if you're interested in something, you can do things that are not offered at your home university, so you can further specialize. Or maybe if you don't want to further specialize, you can look at things that are new and you haven't heard of. So for me, it was great. It was brilliant.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So I see we're getting a few questions in that Paul and Rachel and people are answering in there. Are there any other questions for people here? I might go back. If not, well, we'll just monitor the chat. So please do put them up, because as I say, this is really for you. And so as I see, Paul has given you his details. I'll also put up a link in a minute while I get somebody else to take over from me, which will take you to some more information. We've got a web page you can go and read a lot more about psychology. But can we go back to you, Bino? You were sort of saying about your work with animals and these wild animals. How challenging is that? I mean, what extra does it take to try and work in these sort of environments? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Lesley. Yes, it's the main challenge is apart for the theoretical or scientific challenges that are, I guess, the same for every scientific field. There's a practical challenge to work with wild animals in that because the type of work that I do is non-invasive, so I don't try to force animals to do anything. So what you basically have to do is to try to habituate a group of wild animals to your presence, meaning that they can behave as naturally as possible while you are observing them. But then you are at the complete mercy of what they do. So if they decide to move for the whole day that you are trying to collect data, then you have to move the whole day because that's what they are doing. You rest when they rest. You have lunch when they stop for having lunch. If you are interested in specific behaviors, could be grooming or it could be aggression, you only collect data when they display this type of behavior. So it's really time consuming to do that, but also very rewarding, because once you are tolerated by a wild animal, then you start to discover that they have very different personalities. Some are more aggressive, some are shyer, and so it's really, really interesting.
Okay, thank you, Bino. Have you got any questions more coming up? Will I try and post this? I seem to have lost you at the moment. Can we go back to you, Rachel? You were saying about sort of applying work. How would you, when you have students who want to go into forensic psychology, is there anything they can do? Is there anything they can do during their time at university that might help them with their CV for that?
Yeah, there is. I think that a lot of currently, obviously with the pandemic going on, there's lots of opportunities for people to act in sort of a helping capacity and supporting other people, and those skills are really transferable for a forensic psychologist. So what we might encourage you to do is sometimes you need to be over the age of 18 to work in some certain areas, but if you can get involved in sort of online support services, so for example Shout's one at the minute that's kind of a lot of students are getting involved in, and just providing some support to people with regard to their mental health. As you sort of get over, sort of people become over 18, you can get involved in things like drug and alcohol services, or getting involved with people who are coming into the attention of the criminal justice system. So sometimes people who are sort of rough sleepers, or people who are sort of homeless, that's also an area you can get involved in, which gives you all of those transferable skills that you can take across to work in forensic psychology. Does that help, Lesley?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. Somehow I seem to have lost your picture, so I'm a little bit not quite sort of reacting quite as well as I should to you. Are there any other points there? Cassy, we didn't really hear much of you early on, but what have been your overall experiences of doing psychology and doing psychology at Lincoln?
Well, I mean, I'll start with where it all began for me. The route seems to be quite similar. That psychology, my interest for psychology came from college, from my A levels. I particularly enjoyed the unit of eating behaviours during my A level, which really sparked my interest for the mental health and disorders aspect of psychology, in terms of things like anorexia and bulimia, like eating disorders, which is the area that I'm eventually hoping to go into. Whilst I was at, I took a career ready employability programme in health and social care, in which I got the opportunity to meet with a clinical psychologist.
Where's your bloody browser?
This really allowed me to understand the role of a clinical psychologist, and the opportunity, that the impact that they can have on someone's life. Being able to have that positive impact and really change someone's mental health really resonated with me. So when I ended up being at university, I knew psychology was my passion by then. I had my career goal, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And at Lincoln, it's really one of the main things that I think is fantastic is the actual opportunities you get to develop skills outside of your degree also. I completed the Lincoln Award like last year, and part of that was you had to do a career related activity. So you had to attend a workshop or a session or something that really focused on your degree skills. You got the opportunity to do work experience. I worked with ACES, which is a social housing company, to produce a real life business project. Using this was really incredible to see how even psychology, in an area you wouldn't think would relate into social housing, actually does, because you have to think about the impact of people, what people's living environments are like, what effect this will have, you know, what facilities people are going to need, how people are going to react in certain living spaces. So it really does all relate to the fact psychology can relate to everything, anything you want to do in any area. So at Lincoln, psychology is so varied, it's so broad, you have a lot of control over your choices, over your interests. You really have a chance to develop your skills, both extracurricular and academically. So Lincoln is fantastic. Whatever opportunity you want to do, whatever makes you interested, there's so many societies. Whatever hobby you have, it will be there pretty much. There is always something there that interests you. If there is any questions for a student experience, I only joined, I'm in my second year, so I'm relatively new. Anything, please let me know.
Thanks, Cassy. That's great. So any more questions coming in? Certainly, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you all tonight, but if there's a few more minutes left yet, if you can actually want some answers from us. I see that things are being answered there. Holly's just asked something.
Lesley, may I say something? Because I was following what people were saying in the chat, and I think one important thing to say is that, as Cassy was saying, is that you don't have to consider the psychology degree as a degree that constrains your choices. You can have a broad interest in psychology, and that is more than enough for you to start the degree. And you don't have to worry if you are undecided about whether you want to work with children or adults in developmental psychology, forensic or clinical, because you will have an opportunity in your second and third year to practice and develop or specialize as much as you want later on. And even when you finish your degree, one of the best things about a psychology degree is that it gives you these transferable skills that allow you to change career path. If after your degree, for example, you thought, okay, I wanted to focus in developmental psychology, but later on you decided you want to focus on another area of psychology, you still have the opportunity to do that.
Thanks, a good point, Bino. And also beyond psychology, a lot of the careers that people want to go into really are aided by having a psychology degree. So they are, very, very good job opportunities for people with all the person skills that psychologists have, all those statistical skills that Andrej have been developing, all those sorts of ability to write well and to have all the literacy skills as well. It's really a great sort of opportunity. And just to pick up on one more thing there that was mentioned, we have such a big range of electives that start in your second year and completely almost selective choices throughout your third year. And that will give you a lot more different perspectives, and you can really also make certain that the degree you do is the one that you've really chosen, really, and have something that you think fits what you want to do. And we don't expect you to know now. We don't expect you to know until you've experienced some of these things. And as long as Bino says, you've got a passion for psychology now, then you'll find something out there that where your passion will become very useful and will find you some sort of career path. Okay. Is there anything anybody else want to come back in, Paul, and say something? I know you've been doing a grand job on the chat. But...
Hi, yeah. I think from all the contributions, it's been really good because we've got a sense of how all of the different contributors have arrived at their definition of psychology. In a way, that's what I started with. And in a way, we can see that some of the contributors to the chat are also getting an idea of what they feel psychology is going to be. And from our students as well, we're getting an idea how they've fashioned psychology into what their specialism is. How Andrej started out hating stats and maths and now he's become a nerd in it, as he says. So I think it's really nice that these are examples where people take control of what they want to do. and it's about that taking control. I think that's a point that Cassy made as well. So I'd echo that, and thanks for all of the questions as well. Some really good questions coming in, and really pleased with the response we're getting from people. Thank you, Lesley.
It's just really nice to talk to people here today. And if we haven't answered all your questions, or if we whetted your appetite for psychology, then as you can sort of see from the chat, we do have a virtual open day tomorrow, which is starting at 10 o'clock. There's a link to it in the chat there, but you'll find it on our website if you get that far. But please do come along, do find out more about the university from 10 o'clock onwards. At 11 o'clock will be another group of us, so some of us will be similar, but we'll have other students as well, and we'll just go maybe telling you more about our degree and things that you might want to ask there as well. So I don't know what stage of your learning you are at the moment, whether the university is something that you just one of your options for next year, or 2 years ahead. But if you're interested to plan that ahead or to think about psychology, then please come and get more information from us. We'd love to see you. And if you get a chance to come to Lincoln, as I think was also mentioned, you really ought, because Lincoln is sort of a really, really lovely place. But it's not the place that everybody gets to. It's a little bit off the A1, a little bit off the main routes. And it's actually the case that we're getting a lot more trains coming this way now, and an absolutely wonderful city. And I think the students like it from all I hear, and I hear them telling people like you. So I absolutely believe that they have a great time here. So please do come and see the place if you get a chance. Make Lincoln somewhere on your trip out when you get allowed it. Okay. Ah, so Patrick, we've had somebody to confirm that. Yes. So hopefully we have been helpful if you're having to think about your futures now, and we've very much enjoyed talking with you. So I will say yes. We'll say Bino says bye, everyone, and hopefully we'll a chance to catch you all in person at some point.